It's the 30th of November 1981. There is a brand new ABBA album, a very ominous artwork, and an even more ominous, almost sinister sound in the music and lyrics. This is where beauty meets the darkness of the day. This is The Visitors. We're in the middle of going through all the songs from Voyage right now, so who would have thought that we would not be talking about ABBA's The Visitors as their final album? So I guess we now have to talk about ABBA's previous album, and that was released exactly 40 years to the date. I wasn't there, but I could imagine what it must have been like for many fans. This was not the ABBA sound as it had been familiar from before. This is the world of paranoia, anxieties, sorrow and grief, and even depression. It's as dark as it can get, as melancholic as never before, and it is for me ABBA's masterpiece. Not just because it has all of these moods, but because ABBA was as strong as ever. They really were at their most painful during this time, with Frida and Benny just having gone through what must have been a most devastating divorce, with Agneta and Björn long having gone their separate ways, and yet all four of them were still able to continue to work as hard as ever, probably harder than before, to create what I think is their most complex achievement to that point, in terms of the music, performances, and Björn's incredible lyrics. Don't get me wrong, I love ABBA from before. It's one complete work for me. But exactly that complete work finds its climax, or should I say its first climax, in The Visitors. Because whenever I put on this album, it takes me somewhere else. It takes me to something just slightly higher. The journey to The Visitors started in March 1981, and two of the first songs recorded and chosen really were a forecast of what was to come with the album. Slipping Through My Fingers dealt with the sorrow of seeing Agneta and Björn's daughter leaving the house one day to go to school on her own, the unique bond of parent and child. It's about that fate of growing up, of having to say goodbye one day. What happened to the wonderful adventures, the places I had planned for us to go? Well, some of that we did, but most we didn't. And why, I just don't know. When All Is Said and Done also deals with farewell, but in a completely different way, of course. This is the song that was inspired by Frida's and Benny's divorce. And these two songs really captured right from the beginning that dark and sorrowful mood that would color the entire album. The rest and most of the songs for The Visitors would be recorded in the autumn of 1981, where they really seem to have been at their most productive. And once again, they were experimenting with a lot of different styles and sounds. The title track was spooky, foreboding. Frida's vocals have been treated with a harmonizer to have this mysterious, distant-sounding effect. I Let the Music Speak is structured like a musical number, and for the very first and only time ever, an ABBA album does not feature any joint lead vocals by the ladies on verses. There are still some wonderful harmonies on specific lines or in the chorus of songs, but generally it's either Agneta singing verse or Frida, except on Björn's song, of course. And I might be one of the few people who really like Two for the Price of One. I think it fits perfectly onto the album. Together with Head Over Heels, it's basically the only song that is the closest to an up-tempo, almost cheerful ABBA song, but it's not really, so it doesn't break the mood from the album at all, because in my opinion, Two for the Price of One has a very melancholic undertone to it, which I really like. And another first time was the fact that most of the album was recorded digitally. That resulted in a sound that I would describe as being a bit more clinical, colder, which does fit to the general atmosphere. At the same time, it still has contrasts of some warmer moments. Of course, the analog recordings of When All Is Said and Done and Slipping Through My Fingers stand out a bit, but there is also quite a lovely warm sound coming from the bass, and that bass playing is generally incredible throughout the entire album. One of Us is a prime example, but also songs like Head Over Heels and Soldiers, which have fantastic bass melodies. And then there are all those guitars and synthesizers, sometimes in a great battle with one another, if you listen carefully. Again, for example, on Soldiers. And speaking of contrasts, that's actually what I feel throughout the entire album. It's bittersweet, really, and that is an expression for contrasting emotions. It's melancholic and sad, but there is something strangely beautiful about this album. Their goal with the Visitors was to have an album with some sort of concept, an album where all the tracks are related to each other to make a whole of everything. I mentioned how there is a very special atmosphere going through all those songs. As I said, it's bittersweet, but let us also take a look into how the album comes full circle at the end. Sam made this fascinating observation. Because we start off with Frida on the title track, on the Visitors, she's sitting alone in that room, in panic of those visitors. On the very final song, we are back with Frida, even more intense. Now it's only Frida for the entire song. The others have basically left, and she's still sitting in that room, still alone in that darkness, near the fireplace, but now less with panic, but more with that deeply sad acceptance of her fate. In fact, this is the song that also inspired the album's artwork, and in turn, that artwork perfectly captures the mood of the entire album, but also of the opening song, the title track. The books, the paintings, the furnitures, it's all there. So you see, this is heavy stuff, it's painful and dark, but also very personal and reflective. It's certainly ABBA at their most serious, but also, I think, at their most opened. It always was us who needed ABBA, but this time it seemed as if ABBA needed us. I said in the beginning that this was ABBA's climax, or their first climax. Of course, it's no secret by now that this seemingly final album, well, turned out not to be that grand finale after all. But it was for 40 years, and I remember how Sam told me on the 4th of November this year, the day before Voyage, how we were witness of the last hours of the Visitors being ABBA's final album. It is now their previous album only, but in a way, it still is their swan song, at least for those first 10 years. Now in retrospect, it really was one prolonged goodbye. And remember folks, if you're feeling down or going through hard and rough times, you will make it through. Our four heroes must have been at their most painful, but they simply continued and, if you ask me, not only created some of their best work, but they are still here with us. They made it, so always remind yourself that we do have it in us too, and that we're in this together. And now I want to know from you what you think of the Visitors. What were your first reactions back then on that Christmas Day in 1981, or whenever you listened to it for the first time? What were your feelings, and how do you feel about it now? Next time, we will be traveling again, 40 years into the future from 1981 into now, because, well, in those 4 decades, it was us, after all, who asked them not to leave. So here they are again, and we'll be back to continue our Voyage series with Don't Shut Me Down. Alright, until then, hey do!